Nicola. A gai ddechrau trwy croesawu pawb i'r cyfarfod a i gyflwyno'n hunan yn gyntaf. Fi yw Eifan Evans a fi yw'r prifwythredwr arweiniol ar gyfer eleni yn unig ar gyfer y gwaith rhanbarthol yma. Mae Emma Palmer y fyny yn cyfnewid dyletswyddau flynyddol a wrth bod ni'n creu yr elfen llywodraethiant o'r gwaith rhanbarthol yma, mae yna broses mae rhaid i ni ddilyn i wneud yn siŵr bod yr endid yn cael ei sefydlu'n gyfreithiol gywir, ac wrth gwrs fe fydd y gwaith y grŵp yma yn allweddol bwysig mwyn cwblhau y dyletswyddau stydidol hynny. Mae yna nifer ar yr alwad. Fi'n gobeithio bod chi gyd yn gallu gweld enwau'ch gilydd ar y sgrin. Mae hwnna'n haws wedyn na bod ni'n goffod cyflwyno yn hunain i'w gilydd. Mae yna nifer o staff yma, os nad yw'r gair cynghorydd, councillor wrth ochr nhw, yna maen nhw'n naill ai yn swyddogion y cyngor sir a redeg trwy'r swyddogion yn gyflym i chi, sef Barry Rees o Les Wyn newydd sylweddoli bod dim cynghorydd y bwys enw di. So mae Barry Rees, Duncan Hall, Clive Pinney, Nicola Williams, Stacey Jane Oakman, i ni'n y swyddogion yn gweithio ar ran Powys a Cheredigion, ac wedyn mae yna gynghorwyr gyda ni'n bresennol, sef cynghorydd Peter Lewington, cynghorydd Gareth Lloyd, cynghorydd Rodri Evans, cynghorydd Elizabeth Evans a cynghorydd Corina Ceynan-Wade, a wedyn mae dyn ni bobl annibynnol yn bresennol, Craig Stevens a Carys Howells. Fi'n siŵr, heb camera, fi'n gallu gweld pwy yw Carys Howells.
Carys Howells is the translator.
Cyfieithydd, gret. Oce, croeso Carys. Diolch Nicola. Reit, oce. Yn rôl i yn gryno iawn i fi gyrraedd pwynt 4 ar yr agenda, ac wedyn ar ôl i fi arwain chi trwy'r broses i gyrraedd pwynt 4, fe fydd pwy bynnag sy'n cael ei enwebu fel cadeirydd wedyn yn gallu cario ymlaen gyda'r cyfarfod o'r pwynt yna ymlaen. Felly, yn gyntaf oll, ni wedi wneud yr elfen o cychwynnol o'r agenda. Sewn ni'r ail eitem wedyn ymddiheuriadau. Mae Lynn Hamilton fel aelod annibynnol yn ymddiheurio. Os unrhyw un arall yn ymddiheurio, Nicola? Nicola, ti'n mynd o'n?
Ie, diolch. Carwyn Jones-Evans, please.
Carwyn Jones-Evans yn ogystal. Oce, swyddog yw Carwyn Jones-Evans yn ogystal. Oce, datganiadau o ddiddordeb, os unrhyw beth sydd angen, byddwn ni'n meddwl, byddwn ni'n disgwyl bod unrhyw un ar unrhyw beth heddi i nodi. Oce, so yr peth pwysica oll o'r cyfarfod yma heddi nawr yw benodi cadeirydd ar gyfer yr fforwm yma. So, a os na awgrym o enw sy'n dod ymlaen, ydych chi am enwebu rhywun, neu ydych chi gwirfoddoli? Clive, ti'n mynd mewn?
Ivan, can I just indicate that the chair of this committee should be one of our independent members?
Yeah.
So that narrows the ambit of
choice down to one. Yeah. So, Craig, how do you feel about it? As soon as you teimlo am y tiwra.
Well, mae gwaith yma yn tyfu a dwi. So, wel, sgen I ddim lot o ddewis fi ddim yn meddwl, ond un gyfarfod y flwyddyn sydd yn terms of reference dwi. So, mae Duncan eisiau dweud rhywbeth.
Duncan's got his hand up.
Sorry, apologies for interjecting. I've just seen an email from Alan Davis, who's Ceredigion County Council's independent member. I assumed he was on the call, but it doesn't look like that's the case. So it looks like we've got another individual who should be on the call, but isn't yet.
Yeah, he said he's joined the meeting, but it's not an open meeting. I don't quite understand what that means.
Can you tell him he's probably joined the wrong link? There's 2 links for the... Duncan, if you could send him a message, there's 2 links. I'll double check what I saw now because I was in the waiting room. The one he needs to join is the one issued by Stacey, not the one issued by Julianne Williams. Alan's here now.
Yeah.
He's here now. Excellent. Okay, Alan, wyt ti na? Here they are.
All right, where are
Oh.
Pnawn da pawb.
Come on, Alan.
No.
Right, so
Okay.
da iawn, diolch. So ni wedi cyrraedd y pwynt, Alan, le i ni, yr unig rôl sydd gen i ar ôl nawr yw i benodi cadeirydd, mwyn bod cadeirydd yn gallu rhedeg man nawr. Yr unig ddoi berson, nawr bod ti wedi ymuno gyda ni sy'n gallu cael ei ystyried fel cadeirddion, yw naill ai ti Alan neu Craig. Oedd Craig ar fi'n cymeryd y dylid swydd ymlaen, ond wyt ti wedi ymuno nawr. Ie, falle. So
Ivion, in terms of Craig is a member of the Parks, independent member from the Parks, and in reality, of course, he should only be involved in matters where the Parks are concerned in terms of the SDP. Right. So I'm going to suggest that it should be Alan if he doesn't mind.
Okay.
Sorry, Craig.
There's no need for an apology, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Wel, os felly, mae fe lawr I un person de. Alan, wyt ti'n hapus I gymeryd yr ywennau?
Ie, heb lawr ni'n anodd fel ni'n symud mlaen.
Wel, bydd rhaid I ni gael pleidlais ffurfio, bydd rhaid I ni cael rhywun I gynnig ac rhywun I eilio. Os rhywun yn fodlon cynnig yn y lle gyntaf? Gareth Lloyd yn cynnig, rhywun yn eilio, Elizabeth yn eilio. Pawb o blaid? Unrhyw un yn erbyn neu unrhyw un yn ymatal? Na, wel, Alan, llongyfarchiadau ar dibynodiad yn y swydd anrydeddus bwysig yma. Fydd yn llygu lot fawr o'r amser di. Os gai drosglwyddo draw at y ti nawr, Alan, mae angen penodi is-gadeirydd wrth gwrs fel yr ail ran o eitem 4 ar yr agenda.
So, just cyn symud mlaen, just cadarnhau bod ni'n gweithio ar y dogfen gath I cael ei mas tuag at y cyfarfod 5 am mis Ebrill. Governance Audit Subcommittee, CJC, a ni nawr ar item 4. Cadeirydd a is-cadeirydd ar ôl ni.
Na ti. Na ti.
Mae'r rhaid I gyfadde, dwi ddim quite mor barod a ddylwn ni wedi bod, os ni'n gwybod bod ni'n mynd I cadeirio hwn, ond...
Na, niw.
Right, so felly ni'n troi nawr I penodi is-cadeirydd. Ori hwnna'n mynd ar un rheolau sydd mae'r rhaid I gael rhywun annibynnol I wneud na?
Clive, dim mynd I mewn?
Chair. Yes, Chair. On the basis that the chair of this Governance and Audit Subcommittee should be an independent member, I suggest that we elect Lynn Hamilton as in her absence. I'm sure she'd be happy with that because it's the only thing that we can do.
Okay. Unrhyw cynnig arall o gwbl? Felly, allai gael eilydd at gyfer yr ymwebiad yna? Unrhyw eilydd? Sa'n gallu weld unrhyw eilyddion. Diolch yn fawr, Craig. Diolch, Liz. Pawb o blaid? Diolch yn fawr I chi. Mae hwnna wedi pasio. Felly, nawn ni troi wedyn at beth yw'r terms of reference yn Gymraeg. Sa'n gwybod terms of reference yn Gymraeg. Ond terms of reference, pwy sy'n dod o'r hynna i'r cyfarfod?
Mae Nicola boi'n dod mewn yn gyntaf, Alan.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Chair, but just to make sure you've got the correct set of papers, they came out on the 14th of May, not the 25th. The meeting was rearranged. This is the 14th of May. It should be in your inbox.
Okay, well, we'll plough on. I'll see if I can find them as we go. So, do those papers have the terms of reference as item 5?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So, who's bringing that to the committee?
Chair, I can assist with that. You'll see from the terms of reference which appears on pages 3, 4, and 5 of the document. This is essentially an extract from section 5 of the constitution of the CJC. Members will see that the membership of the Governance and the Audit Committee consists of one lay member from the Governance and Audit Subcommittee of each of the constituent councils, plus 2 councillors from each of those councils, and where the committee is to consider the strategic development plan, it includes a lay member from the national parks. Chair, as normal with Governance and Audit Committee, at least 1/3 of the Governance and Audit Committee must consist of independent members, which we have, and you'll see that we've, in accordance with 1.5, we've appointed a chair at the first meeting of the committee. So thank you very much for that. The scope of the Governance and Audit Committee is set out in section 2, which is to approve the CJC's accounts, income and expenditure and balance, to oversee the production of annual governance statement, to consider and approve the annual audit opinion, to approve the annual audit plan, to receive and review internal audit reports, and to ensure office respond promptly to findings, to consider the annual letter of regulatory plan and specific reports as agreed, and where necessary to take action to ensure action is taken by officers to address those issues which are raised by the committee and others, to comment upon the scope and depth of the external audit work, to assess and approve the annual statement of accounts, to promote the effective relationship between external and internal auditors, inspection agencies and other relevant bodies, and to regularly monitor the Treasury management reports which are issued by the CJC, to review and scrutinise the CJC's financial affairs, to make reports recommendations in relation to the CJC's financial affairs, and to assess the risk management, internal controls, performance assessments and corporate governance, to make reports and recommendations to the CJC on the adequacy and effectiveness of those governance arrangements, and to assess the CJC's ability to manage complaints effectively, to oversee the CJC's internal and external audit arrangements, and to review the financial statements prepared by the CJC, to review the CJC's draft performance and self-assessment report, and to review to draft the CJC's draft response to the panel performance assessment when it comes before this committee. Duty to consider and report to the Auditor General following a special inspection, and a duty to review the CJC's draft responses to any comments made by in the auditor's report. Chair, you'll see that there's a work programme which will be determined. We haven't got a work programme yet, it's to be agreed, and you'll see also that this committee is required to meet at least once annually. But I suspect, Chair, that this committee may want to meet at least biannually is my recommendation. But the recommendation, and that's my recommendation.
Diolch, Clive. Felly, os na unrhyw sylwadau neu cwestiynau o gwbl o'r pwyllgor, please. No? Okay, so I will ask one question. That is, in the scope, I've seen a mention of risk. Where is risk overseen?
The risk is overseen by this committee, and there will be a risk register which will be produced. Nicola, do we have a risk register at this moment in time?
No.
And that's because, of course, this is in effect the early operational stage of the CJC, but we will be developing a risk register which will come before this committee.
Okay, so I would hope that risk comes up early. Risk is an anticipatory thing, not a retrospective thing, in my view. Also, then, point 2.11, regularly is a word that appears at the beginning of that sentence. How frequent should regularly be?
Well, I would say that you do it, Chair, at each of your meetings. Okay, so if we can, I think we ought to note that then. Any other comments already from anybody else on the committee? Craig's got his hand up, Chair. Sorry, who's that? Craig, sorry, yeah.
That's quite all right. Can I just check, the frequency of the meetings is once per year, I think I read, in which case, how are we to undertake the assessment of the kind of risk register and some of the other policies that we're to oversee? Craig, my suggestion to start was that although this is in the Constitution as once a meeting which once a year, we should do it biannually, about twice a year. Okay, thank you.
So my understanding is that this is really the first meeting, and
Yes.
there has been comment from the auditor general at the progress of corporate joint committees across the country. So what I wouldn't want us to be doing is slipping into, it's May now, so let's not do this until round about Christmas time. We need to see some progress, I think, is what I'm trying to say there.
Can I come in there, Chair?
Yeah.
And just to, it is part of my report later on, but just to give this forum a background about why PACE isn't the absolute necessity that you may think it is required for this particular group. The Local Government Elections Act 2021 did recommend that there was a vehicle available to fast-track decision-making processes, and that vehicle was suggested to be a CJC structure, corporate joint committee structure. And the way the Minister, Julie James, presented it was that the corporate joint committee is a tool that can be utilised to whatever benefit it can provide to any regional partnership working. Now, when you're working with a partnership of 11 local authorities, looking at how that a CJC could support that is very beneficial, because you wouldn't want to have to take things through 11 scrutiny committee, individual scrutiny committees, 11 individual cabinet making decisions, or whatever the executive structure is. It fast tracks those decisions. But when you're working in a partnership of two that has already got legal status to the partnership working embedded in its working practices on a day-to-day basis, what we've got is an alternative delivery model that doesn't necessitate creating a separate arm's length entity that employs its own individual staff and so on. So at the moment, we see no benefit in utilising the CJC any further than what we've done already. Hence, we've kept the the value of the budget sitting within the CJC body down to a very nominal fee of just under 300,000. And we don't have a role to play where the region employs centrally employed people accountable to a separate chief executive, accountable to a separate MO, accountable to a separate Section 151 officer. What we have is shared responsibilities between Ceredigion and Powys. So from a financial perspective, the Section 151 officer is Duncan Hall from Ceredigion, who absorbs this work on top of his day job, and doesn't get financially remunerated for it. And likewise, from the monitoring officer function, Clive Pinney picks that responsibility up from the Powys side, and again, he doesn't get financially remunerated for it. It's bolted onto the day job.
Yep.
There may well come a time when we see the added value of the CJC to a point where we'd say, we would benefit from putting more and more resources into the central point. But the trouble with doing that is you're taking that resource away from frontline delivery services. So at the moment, we're exercising the offer that Julie James gave both leaders of the councils to say, use as much of it or as little as whatever you want. And for us, the working relationships between the partner organisations now, including Brecon Beacons National Park, has grown to an extent where we find that the current working model serves us far better than moving to what, for example, the South East have done and employed up to about 70 people centrally to deliver work through a regional model like that. So I hope that explains why there isn't the need for the type of pace that you were suggesting at the beginning.
All understood. I think my main purpose in the message I gave him a few minutes ago was to make sure that there is no more negative criticism that comes our way. Even if there is little utilisation, even if this is a 15-minute meeting in a few months' time, I would prefer we had it so we are seen to be following the process to make sure it is happening. I take all your points and I fully understand, and I'm sure that resourcing this is a very, very challenge. Oh, it's a big challenge for you at the moment, getting things done. So the lighter model is obviously far more suitable. But I just don't want anyone to be able to point a finger and saying that we are being deleterious in terms of not doing what we ought to be doing.
Yeah.
Okay, any more comments or observations on this point?
Just Chair, I think I understood you, Adrian. But do you mean that the Mid Wales growth deal won't be integrated into the CJC, or is that separate from what you're saying?
Well, no, it's separate. Well, it's quasi separate. So what we've got is there are three main pillars of work that sit underneath the CJC. So the three main pillars are your regional transport planning, your economic development at a regional level, and your strategic development plan for future planning opportunities in their entirety. We've created three individual subgroups for each one of those. Now, what some partnerships have done is they've utilised a lift and shift model where they've picked up the work, for example, of the growth deal and dropped it squarely and into the middle. But of course, what that does then is you create a level of bureaucracy on top of everything else. So from a finance perspective, for example, you have to have a completely separate set of accounts which are separately audited by Audit Wales on an annual basis. And the cost implications of that are significant because you have to pay Audit Wales a significant extra sum of money, which detracts from frontline delivery of funding. Whereas when it's encompassed in part of the overall financial responsibilities and accountability of the Section 151 officer within Ceredigion in this model, we don't spend that extra money and we don't feed Audit Wales with a sum of money. So what we're doing is the structure that we've created is specifically a light touch model up until a point where the factors that might change our approach to this is if governments start saying that they will only fund delivery services on a regional footprint and they will only fund directly to the CJC. That would be a game changer and would need us to reflect on our working practices. But to that point in time, what we want to do is make sure that we spend as little amount of money as possible on bureaucracy to make sure that we maximise the benefits to frontline services.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last question. I don't know if it's appropriate, but under the three titles, you obviously mentioned strategic transport plan. Obviously, track includes Gwynedd, so which is outside this partnership. So is that going to be dealt with totally separately?
Yeah, the committee in relation to the regional transport plan deliberately decided that we would no longer include Gwynedd in our planning structures. Right. So both Ceredigion and Powys and the Brecon Beacons National Park have already agreed and written formally to the leader of Gwynedd to explain to him that he'll no longer be part of the old track arrangement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch, Elizabeth. Diolch, Egon hefyd. Any questions or comments from anybody else, please? Fine, so we have the proposal of the terms of reference as presented by Clive a few minutes ago. Are we happy to accept those? Do we need to put that to a vote?
Yes, please, Chair.
Someone to recommend them, please, or propose? Elizabeth, thank you. Someone second? All in favour? Diolch yn fawr. Anyone against? Fine, unanimous. So we move on then to Audit Wales reports. Who is presenting this section?
I'll go through these, Chair. Duncan Hall, Ceredigion County Council.
Thanks, Duncan.
Brilliant, diolch pawb. These reports are all for information. So they would normally, these ones actually have gone through the main board. I think it's timing now because this is the first Governance and Audit Committee. We're sort of retrospectively taking them through this meeting. Normally you would expect the auditors themselves to present the reports, but because of the change of date, it's not been possible to get them at today's meeting. So I'll give a quick flavour of what's already been presented to the board, but then moving forwards, we'd expect external audit to come to these meetings and present these reports themselves. So the first item under item 6 is the 22-23 annual return. So that's already been presented, already been signed off. Points worth noting, because the level of transactions is very low, it's the annual return style of accounts as opposed to it's not full statement of accounts. You've only got to prepare those if we cross 2.5 million as gross expenditure or gross income. So it's a very simple annual return, which for Ceredigion colleagues, that's like we produce for the harbours accounts. And I'm sure Powys County Council have got some small joint committees as well. So in terms of level of transactions, we're talking, I'm on page 7 of the English, contributions of £160,000 across both parties, including on the strategic planning side. Banau Brycheiniog contribute only to the strategic planning side, whereas Powys and Ceredigion contribute to all aspects of the CJC. So £160,000 worth of contributions and total spend of nearly £77,000. So very low spend, very low transactions. It's mainly the employee, a bit of employee costs, and then a small amount of support services. So quite happy to report and very pleased to report that the accounts have been audited by Audit Wales, fully signed off. So unqualified opinion, no matters have been drawn to this committee's attention by Audit Wales. So that's the 22-23 annual return. Second item on the list, so on the English version, I'm now on page, what am I going on to? Page 30, oh no, jumps, page 15 of the English pack. So the second item is a letter from Audit Wales outlining their audit approach. It also outlines their fees, so fairly standard stuff in terms of an Audit Wales letter. Important thing to note for this committee's attention, there's 2 levels of fees. So the audit of accounts fee is just under the £2,000 mark, but then there's also a performance audit fee as well. And again, that's just over the £2,000 mark. So we're looking at a combined fee of just over £4,000. There was an element of frustration in the sense of we didn't actually ask as a CJC for performance work to be done. That's Audit Wales deciding to do performance work. So a couple of items later on, you'll see that they produced a national summary report across Wales, and then producing an individual letter for each CJC. So the Mid-Wales CJC letter is on the table. So for the privilege of having those two reports is costing us as a CJC just over £2,000. So we do pay for the privilege of their reports.
Duncan, could I just interrupt you there? Sorry, can you explain to someone who doesn't understand, what is a performance audit?
So a difference between a financial and a performance audit. So a financial audit is purely the actual accounting side, as in statement of accounts. If you're above 2.5 million, it's full-blown statement of accounts. If you're below 2.5 million, it's a simplistic annual return. Performance report then is any other matters non-financial that the auditors choose to look at. So that could be general performance, general directional travel of the CJC. It could be national themes. It could be focusing on particular issues. So one year they may delve into, we want to do a piece of work on strategic planning. We want to do a piece of work on transport or economy. They can choose where they focus their themes in any given year. So the theme for the year just gone was really looking at the general progress of delivery of CJCs from a wider perspective. That's where they chose to focus their time and energy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So that's the audit approach. You'll see there's a further Audit Wales letter, which is an earlier letter on the agenda. I think that's page 21 of the English pack. And then on top of that, I think a couple of pages later, and apologies, I'm drawing attention to the English because that's what I'm looking at. I assume it's broadly consistent with the Welsh. Page 25 of the English pack, you'll see a letter from myself as Section 151 officer. Important to realise that, as Avian referenced, that I'm actually wearing 2 hats. I'm Ceredigion County Council's Chief Finance Officer and Section 151 officer. When I'm acting as the CJC's Section 151 officer and Chief Finance Officer, I'm actually having to look through a different lens because the CJC is a separate legal entity. It is a completely separate legal entity with its own bank account, with its own ledger. So I am wearing a completely different hat when I'm putting those 2 different hats on. So in that capacity, when I received the Audit Wales letter referring to a performance audit report and a cost of £2,000, my first reaction was, well, we've been told to incur a cost. I wasn't given notice that I needed to include that in my budget or the CJC's budget. So I was disappointed to only be notified late on that Audit Wales were A, doing a piece of work, and B, the CJC were having to pay the privilege of. So you'll see in that pack, page 25 on the English, is me just Fairly polite, these just sort of a shot across the bow to say, not really happy that I was notified so late. Yes, £2,000 is a small amount in the grand scheme of things, but it's principles when it comes to these issues.
That's the problem with dealing with a monopoly, Duncan.
No comment. So the rest of the pack in terms of item 6, then you've got 2 items. So again, on the English, I'm now on page 29. So this is the Audit Wales national report on CJC's progress. At the time it was embargoed, it's no longer embargoed. Quite a few comments in there. I think I'm going to leave everyone to have read it at their own pace, and possibly we can take questions. The focus for me is on the 5 recommendations. So there's quite a lot of text there actually. So page 42 of the English, the 5 recommendations, and I think Avian will cover some of this when he goes through the Chief Executive's report, because at the time of this report, certain things weren't in progress, whereas now time has moved on, a number of matters are in progress. So recommendation one was around governance arrangements being up and running and being effective there for checks and balances. So the fact we've tried to have a first meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee, okay, the first one wasn't successful for technical reasons, but we are now meeting, we are now setting sail. So that's starting to overcome some of recommendation 1. It also focused on the individual subcommittees within the CJC, and as Avian's referenced, we're now looking at the regional transport side. That subcommittee is actually up and running. Similarly with the strategic planning side of things, that subcommittee is up and running, and the economic subcommittee is about to be up and running. So those governance aspects which were maybe criticised or commented on early doors, a lot more work is now in progress now, which links across to recommendation 2 as well. That references strategic development planning and strategic regional transport planning. So again, those subcommittees doing their work or starting to do their work is addressing part of what recommendation 2 was saying. Recommendation 3, I think also links back to some other comments that Avian made earlier in terms of, yes, because the CJC is a separate legal entity, that comes with certain statutory responsibilities, but there's an element of tread carefully and tread slowly in terms of the pace that the CJC works at. So I think the auditors were maybe rushing in a little bit quickly in terms of saying there's a number of public sector duties that need meeting. But again, there's only so much the CJC can do before we suddenly find that there's a cost to all of this. So at the moment, each partner is putting in a fairly small sum of money, but given that we're in particularly challenging financial times, every penny we put into the CJC is a penny that each council could be spending on other matters. So we do have to be careful how much resource the CJC takes, particularly if we're talking bureaucracy and things that don't add value. So recommendation 3 was maybe a little bit in advance of possibly the pace that the CJC wanted to travel at. What I would say though is again, I'm probably stealing a lot of Avian's thunder here, is the CJC does now have a corporate plan. That corporate plan includes corporate wellbeing objectives. So that particular aspect is now covered off by virtue of having a corporate plan in place. So again, that wasn't in place at the time of writing of Audit Wales report. It is now in place. It went out to consultation and has been adopted. So a number of things have changed, and they were in progress at the time Audit Wales wrote their report, but maybe some of them hadn't been approved, but they have now been. Recommendation 4 around the relationship with Banau Brycheiniog, that's been discussed in the main CJC, the main board as well. A recommendation 5 around the Wellbeing of Future Generation Act. Again, I've probably preempted that one. That's where the wellbeing objectives came in, and that's where there is now a corporate plan in place for the CJC as a whole. So that's a flavour. I haven't gone into the detail of that report, but that's a flavour of the recommendations that Audit Wales were coming up with, and actually a flavour of what's already in train. Not that they were put in train to react to that report, they were things that were naturally in train anyway. And then what Audit Wales have done then on top of that, that was the national report. So those sort of issues were common and typical across all CJCs. They've then done a very specific letter specifically on the Mid Wales CJC, which is page 45 onwards. So a little bit of specifics to Ceredigion and Powys and Banau Brycheiniog as Mid Wales CJC. that letter's got a number of bullet points in it, but doesn't actually contain any specific recommendations. But hopefully the flavour I've given you on the national points sort of gives you a flavour for the actions being taken or have been taken to overcome some of the national recommendations. So really all the items I've just gone through are purely on the agenda for information. They have all gone through the main CJC's board. So generally members of the CJC have already had the opportunity to comment on them and feedback on them. So I think that's the overview I wanted to present on the Audit Wales reports. Diolch.
Thank you, Duncan. Any questions or comments? Rodri.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Just one question, perhaps observation from what you've said now on the recommendations from Audit Wales. Obviously, that's a general one for all the CJCs, but is there an expectation that all CJCs, obviously I've seen what Avion's going to be saying later on, but is there an expectation that we have to do a management response back as individual CJCs to that to the recommendations, or how do you tick the boxes to show that you have done what they've recommended, and is there a management response to be had?
I can answer that, Rodri.
Sure.
The board have already responded to it. We had quite a robust challenge about it, to be honest, because the Audit Wales initial report came back and had gone beyond what the legislation required of local authorities. And one of the recommendations they made was that every local authority across Wales should look at putting as many services as they possibly could through the CJC model. Now, the legislation doesn't require that and doesn't ask for it. What we said was that, enforcing that kind of activity will actually be counterproductive in the long term, because people, will naturally pull away from that kind of enforced approach. Whereas if you look at the partnership working between Ceredigion, Powys and Bannau Brycheiniog at the moment, that's grown and evolved very productively so far. And we've got other service areas. For example, the partnership in the education agenda is a very strong, robust one between Ceredigion and Powys at the moment. It doesn't fall under the remit of the CJC, but the original recommendation that was written in suggested that we should be dropping that in as well. Well, we challenged back, the board agreed to challenge back, and Audit Wales have watered down the recommendations quite significantly. And I think that the danger is that, and just to support and echo what Duncan has said here, is that, this was presented, the CJC structure was presented with good intention in order to try and fast track democratic decision-making processes. But there is a danger when you're only in a partnership of two that you could actually undermine democracy in a way, because when you've only got two, you still need local scrutiny. You still need to make sure that the decisions made are aligned with the priority areas of both individual authorities. When you're talking about a regional development plan for somewhere like the Cardiff City deal, and you're talking about the valleys, then the scale of what you're dealing with there and the complexities that are involved with that, you then have a board of 11 people. The board within Ceredigion has got 2 leaders, and when you talk about strategic development plan, a representative from Bannau Brycheiniog around the table. So ultimately, you've got only 2 decision makers around the table. So it's critical that we make sure that we look after local democracy in all of this as well. So that's why we've made sure that our response back was pretty robust to say, support the agenda of collaboration and working in partnership, support the rationale about economies of scale of working in close proximity with one another, but it has to be a model that suits and is pragmatic for a partnership of 2. If I was a lead CEO in the Southeast, I'd have a different view, because I would be representing 11 local authorities. But when you're in a partnership of 2, you have to think about what serves this particular structure best. So the response has gone back, and Audit Wales did amend their recommendations accordingly.
Sure, Adrian. I wasn't aware of that, but no, thank you for that explanation, Joe.
Okay, any other questions or comments? One from me, Duncan, if I may, and that is that you run through the external auditor activity and their plans and costs and all the rest of it. Anything? Is there any intention for any internal audit here?
Well, the internal audit responsibility rests with Powys County Council. They have undertaken in terms of the annual report, the annual return, they've done the sort of mini annual governance aspect of it. It's not a full AGS as we'd normally see it, but there's an element of yes, no type answers. So they've undertaken that role to review that part of the annual return and complete that. So yes, they've done that role. At the moment, because the transactional activity is literally limited, I can probably, it's probably into double digits, the transactions, but not into hundreds of transactions. So as and when the CJC, or if it grows more significantly, then internal audit's role will grow accordingly. But at the moment, their role's fairly limited until such time as it does, or if it grows.
Okay, and of course that's got a resource implication as well if it has.
That's the issue, yeah.
Okay, fine, thank you, Ben. So any more points on item 6? Any more questions on item 6? So thank you for that. They're for information, were they, Duncan, all those reports? And we should note that we have received those, so thank you very much.
Correct.
We'll move on then to item 7, sef adroddiad y prif weithredwr. Avion?
Diolch yn fawr. A bod yn onest, fi wedi cyflwyno lot fawr o hwn yn barod. Fi'n credu un o'r elfennau dwi ddim wedi cyffwrdd ag falle yw dwi wedi siarad am byti 2.4, fi wedi sôn am beth yw'r cyfansoddiad. So mae hwnna'n eitha clir am byti beth ni'n gyfrifol, pwy sy'n atebol am y bwrdd ei hunan. Mae fe esbonio sy'n rhaid ar y cychwyn. Mae'r ddoi arweinydd yn cyfnewid yn flynyddol pwy yw'r cadeirydd y CJC. Felly ar gyfer Lenny, mae James Gibson Watt yn cadeirio, ac oherwydd bod James yn y gader, dwi'n cymeryd y dyletswydd wedyn o fod yn brif swyddog i gefnogi James, fel bod un o Geredigion, un o Powys. Ar ôl yr cyfarfod blynyddol mewn mis neu ddoi, fe fydd y dyletswydd yna'n cyfnewid, fe fydd arweinydd Ceredigion yn cymeryd yr ôl y gader, ac wedyn fydd Emma Palmer yn cymeryd y cyfrifoldeb dyletswydd drosto i fod yn brif weithredwr arweiniol ar gyfer y flwyddyn nesaf. So mae hwnna wedyn yn cael ei gytuno bod hwnna'n gyfnewid yn flynyddol. Yn ogystal yna wedyn, dwi wedi sôn yn barod am byti beth yw'r dyletswyddau sydd yn cwmpo naturiol o fewn y CJC. Beth sydd ddim law fan hyn, falle, a beth sydd yn creu tipyn o bent host i ni, wrth gwrs mae dyn ni comisiynwyr o bob math wedi cael ei sefydlu yng Nghymru. So mae dyn ni Comisiynydd Iaith, mae dyn ni Comisiynydd ar gyfer ychwandeong o wahanol dyletswyddau. Maen nhw gyd yn ôl y deddfwriaeth a'n gallu gofyn i ni i gyd yn ffurfio gyda'i gofynion a'i safonau nhw. A mae hwnna'n ei hunan yn creu haen o fiwrocratiaeth sylweddol iawn. A gallwch chi ddychmygu, os ewn ni mewn i'r gofynion ieithyddol enghraifft, os ydyn ni'n edrych ar y gofynion ieithyddol rhwng Ceredigion a Powys, mae'n amhosib i gael safonau sydd yn cymhathu'r ddwy awdurdod, oherwydd mae safonau Ceredigion gyda rai anoddau i gyd yn ffurfio nhw yng Nghymru, yn naturiol achos bod yna ardal le mae'r iaith yn iaith gyntaf, gyda wedi sefydlu fel yna, ac i Powys, mae safonau nhw, achos bod nhw'n ffinio gyda Lloegr, mynd o'i ardaloedd nhw'n ffinio gyda Lloegr, mae safonau nhw wahanol iawn i ni. Ond eto i gyd, mae'r Comisiynydd i'r Iaith wedi bod yn ystyried o dwi'n rhoi un set o safonau i bawb. Gall hwnna rhoi baich ariannol aruthrol ar sgwyddau Powys, dim ond er mwyn cydymffurfio gyda safonau iaith enghraifft. A beth yw'n dadl ni yw, tra cyd y bod ni'n darparu dogfennau dwyieithog, tra gyd y bod na siaradwyr yn gallu siarad Cymraeg neu Saesneg a bod yn cyfieithu ar y pryd gyda ni, mae hwnna'n ei hunan os bosib yn cwrdd gyda'r gofynion enghraifft ieithyddol. A dyna'r dadleuon i ni wedi bod yn rhoi nôl o'r herwydd hynny. Wedyn o ran egwyddor wedyn, mae i ni wedi creu'r subgrwps o dan y brif endid wedyn, yn benodol i wneud yn siŵr bod na fewnbwn gwleidyddol democrataidd yn dod o bob un o'r partneriaid, felly bod hwnna'n ddigonol yn dod mewn rownd y bwrdd. Byddwn ni ddim yn moyn, gan mai dim ond 2 arweinydd ac chynrychiolydd o Banau Fechreinio yn unig sy'n ystod rownd y bwrdd, bydde fe yn anoeth yn yn barn i gyd bod rheini a'r pwerau i benderfynu ar bopeth ar ben ei hunain heb bod na fewnbwn yn dod o democratydd yn dod fewn i'r trafodaethau yn yr isbwyll gorau. Felly, ni wedi creu'r isbwyll gorau yna yn benodol mwyn gwarantu bod yr argymhellion sy'n mynd ger bron yna mwyn cymeradwyo beth sy'n cael ei drafod yn wleidyddol ar lefel is ran hynny. Eto, pe bysen ni mewn gwisgo het gwahanol, mewn lleoliad daearyddol gwahanol, bydde mwy na thebyg farn gwahanol gyda fi wedyn am yr angen ar gyfer isbwyll gorau. A mae hynny i weld gyda'r gwahaniaeth rhwng, byddwch chi'n clywed mwy a mwy fel bod y CJCs ma'n datblygu ac yn esblygu. Os edrychwch chi ar beth sy'n digwydd yn ardal Caerdydd, er enghraifft, mae gynnyn nhw nawr prif weithredwr wedi cael ei phenodi i weithredu ar ran y CJC yn hollol annibynnol i bob un o'r awdurdodau eraill. Mae hi wedi penodi swyddog 151 yn ar wahân i bawb. Mae hefyd wedi penodi swyddog monitro ar wahân, ac mae'r awdurdodau wedi trosglwyddo trwy'r broses TUPE transfer, wedi trosglwyddo 70 o staff yn barod o'r 11 awdurdod mewn i'r endid yn y canol yma, ac mae'r rheini'n gweithio'n hollol annibynnol wedyn i'r awdurdodau o ran staffio ac yn y blaen. Yn wahanol i ni, beth i ni'n neud fan hyn, os edrychwch chi ar 2.7 ar yr adroddiad, mae hwnna'n rhestru pa ddyletswyddau sy'n gorwedd gyda naill ai Ceredigion neu gyda Powys. Ac i ni'n rhannu'r baich yna, ac oni bai bod arian yn dod lawr, le mae arian grant yn dod lawr, le bod hawl cyfreithiol gyda ni i ddefnyddio peth o hwnna i gyflogi staff yn ychwanegol, mae'r mwyafrif o dyletswyddau yna yn cael ei ymsugno gyda gwaith o ddydd i ddydd swyddogion. So, er enghraifft, dwi'n cymryd y rôl fel prif weithredwr arweiniol ar y foment, dwi'n cael cuno gwarian ychwanegol yn wneud y dyletswydd yna, mae hwnna wedi cael ei ychwanegu arno i'r gofynion o ddydd i ddydd. Ond yn islawr yn y strwythur, os oes na fodd gyda ni gyflogi staff i weithredu ar ran y rhanbarth yn ei gyfanrwydd, beth i ni'n edrych arno fan hyn yw model le does dim ots pwy sy'n cyflogi pwy yn hyn o beth. Os oes rhywun yn ymgeisio am swydd, digwydd bod yn byw yng Ngogledd Powys, a dyna'r person mwy addas i'r rôl, yna ni'n gofyn i Powys, ydych chi'n bodlon cyflogi'r person yna yn y rôl yna, a wedyn byddwn nhw'n gweithredu ar ran y ddwy awdurdod, os ydy yn ymwneud gyda trafnidiaeth, neu os ydy yn ymwneud gyda chynllunio, ni'n pigo lan yn fwy gyda Banau Fechreinio yn ogystal, ond dyn ni ddim yn creu endid newydd sydd wedyn yn goffod cael gofynion HR annibynnol i gyflogi'r bobl yna. So, o safbwynt wedyn y gwaith sydd wedi digwydd yn barod, mae nifer o'r pethau yma i ni wedi cyfeirio ato yn barod, bod y bwrdd yn cwrdd yn gyson, mae'r isbwyll gorau yna sydd angen cwrdd, mae rheini wedi cwrdd yn barod, mae yna arian yn dechrau llifo nawr ar gyfer creu strategaeth trafnidiaeth rhanbarthol. I ni wedi cwrdd gyda'r gweinidog a herio yr broses i ni'n dilyn ar hyn o bryd. Dwi ddim yn credu bod e'n neud lot o synnwyr o ran cynllunio strategol, a i ni wedi rhoi'r dadleuon yma ger bron yn barod. Os ydyn ni'n goffo creu strategaeth cynllunio rhanbarthol, honno ddyle fod y brif strategaeth ar draws y rhanbarth yn y lle cyntaf, a felly blaenoriaeth dyle fod y ddogfen honno. Ond mae'r Llywodraeth wedi gweithio ni ddatblygu'r strategaeth ar gyfer yr elfen trafnidiaeth o flaen creu yr SDP. A felly mae hwnna, yn y marn ni, mae fe'n rhoi cart o flaen y ceffyl. I ni'n cynllunio polisïau a strategaethau sy'n gorwedd o dan yr SDP, cyn bod ni wedi sgwennu'r SDP hunan. Dylen ni fod yn canolbwyntio'n gyfan gwbl ar yr SDP. A i ni wedi herio yn gyson iawn yr elfen yma, yn enwedig o safbwynt Powys, achos mae Powys dan anfantes anferthol fan hyn, achos mae yna ddisgwyliad ar Powys i adolygu yr LDP yn y lle cyntaf, a wneud LDP light, plus cael LDP newydd yn ei le, a mae gofynion iddyn nhw sgwennu SDP ar yr un pryd. A i ni di herio gweinidogion ar hyn droion. A yn anffodus, ar hyn o bryd, does yna ddim fawr iawn o synwyr cyffredin yn dod i'r bwrdd fan hyn. A mae yna gost ariannol anferthol ychwanegol yn gorwedd ar faich Powys i gwblhau'r holl dyletswydde yma. Ond yn anffodus, dyw gweinidogion yn Gaerdydd ddim yn gwrando ar y dadleuon. Ond mewn byd delfrydol, dylen ni fod yn sgwennu, dyna rôl nawr y CJC yma, dylen ni fod yn sgwennu yr SDP yn gyntaf, Strategic Development Plan yn gyntaf, wedyn canolbwyntio ar beth dylai cwmpa mas o'r elfen trafnidiaeth, a beth dylai fod yn cwmpa mas o'r tyfu'r economi yn lleol. A dyna'r sequence, os ych chi'n dymuno, dylai fod yr strategaethau yma'n gorwedd. Ond yw'r oblygrwydd na ddim gyda ni, felly mae yna i ni'n bwrw mlaen yn cydymffurfio gyda gofynion y Llywodraeth ac i ni'n paratoi dogfennau yma allan o sync a'i gilydd ar y foment, ond yn dawel bach fel swyddogion ac gyda chefnogaeth gwleidyddol ni wedi gweud fe fyddwn ni'n cadw golwg ar beth dylai fod yn yr SDP yn y pen draw, achos i ni'n sgwennu'r SDP allan o sync yn gyfan gwbl gydag e. Os ewn ni mlaen wedyn yn yr adroddiad, i chi'n gallu gweld bod mae llawer o beth mae Duncan wedi cyfeirio ato o safbwynt yr incwm sydd wedi dod mewn i hyrwyddo'r gwaith yma. I ni'n siarad am ffigurau bach iawn yn y darlun mowr. A dyna y rheswm i ni wedi herio Archwilio Cymru i ddweud i fod yn resymol gyda'i ffïoedd nhw, achos bach iawn o'r gwaith yma sy'n digwydd ar un o bryd. Ond fel wedys i, os ydy'r llif yr arian yma'n newid yn y dyfodol, bod amodau grant yn gorfodi arian dim ond mewn i CJC yn unig, mae hwnna wedyn yn mynd i newid y dynamig, ond mae'n mynd i newid y ffordd o feddwl, a byddwn ni'n goffod adrodd ar hwnna i chi maes o law. Ond ar hyn o bryd, mae'r arian, mae gan Ceredigion yr ôl o, i ni defnyddio'r term Saesneg, the host authority. Oedd beth oedd yn cael ei ofyn oedd, you need to identify a lead authority. O'n i ddim yn moyn defnyddio'r iaith na, achos ar ddiwedd dydd, mae'r arian sy'n dod mewn, i ni'n defnyddio cyfrif Banc Ceredigion, ond beth bynnag sydd yn dod mewn, mae'n goffo bod yn hollol dronoiw, mae defnyddio un o'r ddwy awdurdod jyst i gynnal, i ddal yr arian yn y cyfrif banc ac i drosglwyddo'r arian sydd yn ddeledus, un partneriaid ni yn hollol agored a thloiw. Felly, dyn ni ddim yn rhoi'r teitl lead authority i unrhyw un, ni'n defnyddio'r term host authority yn y cyd-destun yna. O safbwynt cynllun strategol wedyn, ni wedi paratoi cynllun strategol, ond a bod yn onest, os ydych chi'n edrych ar gynllun strategol Powys a chi'n edrych ar cynllun strategol Ceredigion, beth sydd gyda chi yw cyfuniad o'r ddoi. Dyn ni ddim wedi creu unrhyw beth yn wahanol, ac yr elfennau sydd yn berthnasol i Banau Brycheiniog yng nghyd-destun cynllunio, ni wedi tynnu rheini mewn i'r amcanion sy'n rhaid i ni gynnwys yn ogystal, a amcanion lles sydd wedi bod yn y ddogfen. Fe fydd yna gofyniad blynyddol yn ni i sgwennu adroddiad i roi diweddariad luniarni, ond wrth gwrs mae'r gofyniad na arno ni fel cyrffan nibynnol yn barod, a cyfuno'r adroddiadau yna bydd isen ni'n wneud pan ni'n cydymffurfio gyda'r gofynion cyfreithiol hynny hefyd. Ac wedyn mae'r gweddill, mae fe jyst i roi sicrwydd i chi bod pethau ar waith gyda ni'n enwedig, Alan, o'ch chi'n cyfeirio ato risg er enghraifft, fe fydd rhaid i ni ystyried siwt i sgwennu risg, fel bod yr amser yn mynd mlaen o'r cyfeiriad fydd yn cael ei gofodi arno ni, a faint o arian fydd yn cael ei llyncu gyda biwrocratiaeth, fydd yn mynd a llai fydd ar gael i fynd i gwasanaethu rengflan. Yn y byd delfrydol, ni'n trio gweithredu model fan hyn sydd yn gwarantu bod yr symiau mwyaf phosib yn mynd lawr i'r gwasanaethau rengflan yn ytrach na bod nhw jyst o ran cydymffurfio gyda gofynion ychwanegol deddfwriaethol sydd yn ychwanegu dim gwerth yn y pen draw yn y marn ni. Falle dylwn ni wedi gweud y frawddeg na, ond rwy'n credu fod yn ychwanegu gwerth os nag i ni'n gweld bydd i'r bobl sy'n byw yn ganolbarth Cymru a na dylen ni ddim fod yn rhoi fwy o arian mewn i bwrocratiaeth. Mae rhaid ni lleihau hynny gymryd allan ni. So mae'r adroddiad yma wedyn dim ond i'w nodi. Okay.
Diolch yn fawr, Chairman Ivan. Bach drwy'r rhaid o sylwadau i fyna. So, unrhyw cwestiynau neu sylwadau o'r pwyllgor, please? Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. So regarding the risk register, Avion, I don't know when we're going to be meeting next, but I'm assuming that Ceredigion and Powys will work out a template. It'd be interesting to see how that will work out and what you're going to put on it just now. But as you say, that will develop. So so by the time that we meet again, we're going to have some form of a model of a risk register in front of us.
Yes, and you know, one of the obvious ones that will be on the risk register is the fact that the requirements on this partnership is to develop strategic documents out of sequence. You know, you'd never do that in a logical world. You'd never do that in a logical world. You'd sequence them correctly. So your overarching SDP should be the main document, and then you'd go into your local development plans would fall out of it. Your economic regeneration would fall out of it. And to be honest, Elizabeth, many other strategic documents which would go way beyond the requirements of the CJC would fall out of it. But at the moment, we're focusing on the regional transport plan when we haven't even started to the work on the SDP, which is there's no logic to it. So I would imagine that would be, you know, I don't for a moment imagine Welsh Government would like to see that in a risk register, because it's what they're enforcing on us. But nevertheless, that I see is the biggest risk.
Sorry, Chair, can I ask even regarding that? Have they responded with a rationale as why they want to put the cart before the horse?
There's just there are legal requirements set. There's a drop dead date for the LDP in Powys, and because there's a drop dead date put on it, they've said in order to be legally compliant, you have to review your LDP by that drop dead date, and that takes precedent over your SDP. Now, because then Powys have got that drop dead date, they're just ploughing ahead and saying, you also need this, you also need that, you also need the other. And if I'm being critical for a moment, there's no joined up thinking there, and that worries me, because moving forward, if this partnership is really going to flourish and work as it's intended to, we have to sequence things correctly. Otherwise, there'll be people asking questions for this, you know, from a scrutiny perspective, be saying, why on earth did you prioritize that day when it doesn't link with this strategy over here? And you know, so I may as well flag it up right at the beginning. It doesn't make sense to do it like this.
It's a shame, because it could start off being just very messy from the beginning. Shame. Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth, anything else from anybody else?
I'm sorry. No, could I please make a comment? I'm a fairly new councillor on the LDP in Powys, and I just wanted to say that we're already a year late on the public consultation, and part of this is because the few planning officers that we have been, I believe, busy on the SDP, and I don't know who in the past has prepared the SDP, but there's an amount of confusion. That's what I'm observing. Thank you.
The SDP hasn't actually started work yet. What we're doing is working on the skeleton of how we would structure it, because the Banau Brycheiniog, Powys and ourselves and Ceredigion, we have to work in partnership to create that high level, and the amount of work involved with the SDP is comparable with the requirements of creating an LDP at the same time. So it's unfair on Powys. It is unfair on Powys to expect Powys to actually do both at the same time. It's a massive ask. It's ridiculous, to be honest.
Could I please ask, is it the same officers that have to do both?
Yes, but
okay,
what we've done is, in order to try and support one another, Ceredigion have given the lead responsibility for this work on one of its planning officers to try and support and take some of the pressure off Powys colleagues, because it's just a huge ask.
Anything else from anybody else? Okay, so we're asked to note the content of Avion's report to us. Everyone's happy to do so. Grand, thank you very much. Then we will move on to item 8, which is, I think, the forward work programme. Who's leading us through this?
If you bear with me, Chair, I'll scroll down through the papers.
I can come in here, Ivan, if you like.
Yeah, if you can, Nicola, because
Yeah, so there isn't a forward work programme, but in the terms of reference, Clive read out to you that it's up to this committee to determine their forward work programme. So I put it on there really just for an open discussion. Do you want to, at this point in time, agree a forward work programme, or is that something that will evolve as this committee meets in the future?
Thank you. So I think that's a reasonable question just to throw out around the committee. Thoughts, please. Elizabeth.
Well, I think, you know, our first point of reference at the next meeting will be the risk register and, you know, how it's formatted and how we move forward with that. I certainly think that should be a priority given everything that Avion has just said.
Thank you. I would totally agree with that. That's, as I said earlier, risk to me is an anticipatory activity, not a retrospective activity. So that will be good. Anything else from anybody? So who then, in terms of responsibilities and picking up actions, who takes the action for managing the forward work programme and its drafting? Was that you, Nicola? You raised the issue?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
So I am the programme lead for the Corporate Joint Committee. So I'll be tasked with doing the risk register. But if I could ask, Chair, when would you like to next meet? And then I can make sure that obviously the work has progressed.
Yeah, indeed. I suppose, well, we haven't quite finished this item yet, so we'll come to that item.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine. Good. Anything else that anyone thinks we need to be on our forward work programme?
The Chair, sorry if I may. So there were a number, in the terms of reference, there were a number of items that we were responsible for. And if we're only meeting twice a year, then it feels like we should be at least understanding where we are against those responsibilities, you know, at the next meeting, and maybe either signing something off or knowing that it's coming to the following meeting in terms of a work programme. And I would suggest that risk is on every agenda item that we meet as well, so that we're constantly reviewing what the latest status is with risk. Yeah,
I suppose an extension. Thank you for that. Could I extend that slightly and say that is there any briefing or better understanding or information sessions that this committee needs to have to take a wider context rather than just dealing with the agenda as presented?
At the moment, Alan, I would suggest not, because what we're doing is the construction of the CJC is completely in its infancy. What we're still grappling with is the requirements according to legislation and compliance with various acts and different sets of legislations. We're getting communication from civil servants about certain service areas, and they're referencing the CJC when the CJC isn't part of, or it doesn't sit under the legislation of the CJC. So I currently attend national meetings with senior civil servants from Cardiff to try and thrash all of this detail out. Some of the biggest complexities we've got are associated with commissioners themselves, where their requirements are just growing like topsy on us. And what the commissioners are telling us is they're responsible for holding legally constituted bodies to account for compliance with what there is in their legislation. And unless Welsh Government tell them differently, that's what they intend doing. So what we're trying to demonstrate to them is you're holding us to account for things that are actually at the moment are just superficial, and we're nowhere near ready for that kind of work. So until we've grappled and sorted the governance out 100%, I would suggest that there's a lot of work going on in the background around the final principles of how a CJC is delivered. To give you, I think the way that it's been presented at the moment is rather dogmatic, rather than being pragmatic to recognizing that different geographical areas of Wales will need to will have to have different structures and different governance arrangements to match what suits them best. And we're still in that muddy grey area of sorting the governance out at the moment. And I suppose what the next meeting, the next lead CEO report will need to give you progress on where we are with that. And as soon as we got clarity on all of that, at that point in time, I would suggest that maybe we start getting into the nuts and bolts of the additional requirements of the CJC. But it's fractionally too early to go into too much of the other detail yet.
Okay. Craig, does that answer your point?
Yes, it does. I suppose what was leading my question was kind of any further Audit Wales reports that are critical of us for lack of progress, really. So kind of anything that we could, if there were things that were easier to progress, then perhaps we should. I understand exactly what Avion's saying about capacity, resource, timing, getting all the structures right. They're all really important things. I just didn't want us then to be in a position where we get a negative audit report from Audit Wales. So I suppose I can leave it to officers to balance all these things up, and let us know how we getting on by the next meeting.
If you go back to the report that Duncan referenced about the fees, audit fees, we had an interesting conversation with Audit Wales because those weren't the original fees they'd put forward. I forget what the actual figure was. Duncan, you might be able to remind me, but it was it was significantly higher than what they are now. And the reason it was significantly higher was because they just applied a blanket approach to the process where you had the two strands of auditing, and they were going to apply a full-blown audit charge. And you're quite right then, Craig. What would have happened was we would have had an audit report that would have been pretty scathing of where their perceptions of where we should be in comparison to where we are at the moment and reality of where our conversations are with government. So we've had one-to-one meetings with Audit Wales to explain to them exactly where we are on the journey as far as constitution, governance, and delivery of services. And they've subsequently revised down their figures quite dramatically from where they were originally. So when you talk about the performance side now, it will be specifically to look at progress in getting the governance right. So exactly where we are now is where Audit Wales expect us to be now.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think it would be useful if we had, for the next meeting, a list of plans that's expected of us. So we've got a corporate plan. Powys have to develop the LDP. There's the STP. There's a biodiversity plan that I don't think has been published yet. So a list of plans, but also where are we with existing partnerships? So for instance, we're not part of TRAC anymore, but where does the CJC lie with the PSB, for instance? Where is there going to be crossover, duplication, things like that? We just need to get a grip of maybe.
PSBs are probably an example of just how complex all of this is, because if you look at the two PSBs in Ceredigion and Powys, Banau Brycheiniog sit on the Powys PSB. They don't sit on the Ceredigion one. The Powys have got their own health board. Ceredigion are part of Hywel Dda Health Board. So it's not going to ever be possible to merge PSBs to work on a similar footprint. There's an overlap, so unfortunately in Mid Wales we're a little bit like Stretch Armstrong. And if you look at the Banau Brycheiniog, for example, I think Banau Brycheiniog would link into at least 3 different CJC structures, because it overlaps in that way. So it's the footprint makes life very, very difficult to be able to say, well, you know, what exactly do we need to encompass in all of this? So this is part of the argument we're making about keeping things as simple as we possibly can. We mustn't overcomplicate this. The legal requirement are 3 pillars: regional transport, economic growth, and strategic development plan. And we you know, I think the trick is to just keep it contained within that for now. And if we see opportunities going forward over a period of time, let's give ourselves that ability to grow and evolve in a controlled way, rather than be bounced into something that will ultimately lead to a car crash, and it will lead to Audit Wales writing damning and scathing reports about us because we hadn't thought things through carefully enough. So getting Welsh Government, Audit Wales, various commissioners all to agree that we need to walk before we run has been hugely beneficial to us all, I think. And as we progress along this journey, we need to constantly bang that drum to be careful, because we won't have the capacity to meet everybody's aspirations and expectations of us. If we say yes to everything, we're going to be in trouble.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. I would just say I accept all you've said. I'm not challenging that at all, but I would just throw a slightly different view in that it would be great if progress can be seen to be being made, and somehow I don't want us to be slowed down because and as I said earlier, I don't mind if we meet and we only have very short discussions to update on where we are, but I don't want us ever to be in a position of someone saying you haven't met for 12 months.
Again, no.
Getting a negative comment. I think probably reflects something that Craig was saying as well in a similar light. You know, we need to look at this in a positive and, you know, see the benefits that are occurring. So that's all I'll say on that. Anything else from anybody else on this particular item? Okay, so we've got a couple of things then, Nicola, there for the forward work programme. Are you happy? You've got a note of those, Nicola?
Yes, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's great. Lovely. Thank you very much. So that then takes us to item 9, which I think is any other business. Does anyone else have anything that they wish to raise this afternoon? No, all good. Clive, you've got your camera back on. Is that because you want to say something?
Chair, my camera's been on all the time, so I'm not sure what.
You've just popped it on my screen again. So left,
okay.
Obviously. Okay, so we'll and then go to item 10 then, which was the date of the next meeting. If we took the recommendation of 6 months, that takes us to back end of November, December time, which I think Duncan will have and others will have their heads deep in figures for next year, let alone this year. So can I suggest that we look sort of September, October time?
Chair, I'm sure we could arrange that.
The only health warning I give everybody, of course, is if there's a general election called at that time, we'd have to be mindful of purdah at that time. So,
yeah.
But you know, other than that, I think it'd be fine.
Well, we'll know who to blame for that one, Avion, so that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I think, you know, once we go a bit further on, I think, you know, without doubt there will be a lot of late night work on next year's financial plan. So let's not try and coincide this work with that activity as well. We'll try and find a little bit of gap in September, October. Is that okay? All happy with that? And I'll leave it to whoever it is in the chair at that stage to in the lead. Sorry, not the lead. What was the word? Not the lead authority. Host authority.
Yeah, host authority. Host authority.
Yeah. Whoever's the host to set the date for us. That would be great. So I think that brings us to the end of this this meeting.
Lovely. Thanks, Alan. Thank
you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. In a time. Well, now.
Bye.